Jack wasn't always like this. Once he could feel joy. Once. But that was long gone. All that was left were scraps of the past, shreds of memories, burned by memories of the war. Too many nights he'd spent staring at the ceiling, huddled into the dirty mattress when the silence became unbearable. It crushed his chest, left him stripped bare to his thoughts, to the fears that were eating him from the inside out. After the war, he tried to get back to life, but the past pulled him back like a viscous blackness. The sounds of the city were annoying. People became strangers. But worst of all, he lost himself. More and more often the thought came to him that he was just a shell, without substance, without a future. Jack searched for salvation, seeking silence, but the silence he found was perverse. It all started with that letter. An unfinished contract, forgotten experiments, a missile complex lost in the desert sands. They were looking for volunteers to clean up an abandoned mine. But none of the locals wanted to go, not even for money. Stories of mysterious disappearances, of strange noises and shadows lurking in the depths, scared away even the most desperate. But Jack didn't care. He didn't care about people, about money, about his own life. The emptiness inside was so deep that nothing else mattered. Then he made a decision. This place would be his last mission. But he never imagined what he would find there. The shaft greeted him with silence. The iron doors, rusted and creaking, led into the belly of forgotten corridors. The walls seemed alive to him, their cold concrete seemed to breathe, absorbing every movement, every breath. Every step echoed, as if someone somewhere in the depths was whispering to him, "You're not alone here." Jack moved forward, slowly, with a wariness developed through years of service. He had always sensed danger. Now that feeling grew stronger with each step, as if the place itself was warning him to leave before it was too late. Green liquid oozed from cracks in the walls. Its glow cast a dim light on the corridor, breaking the darkness but leaving it even more eerie. There was a musty odor of decay in the air, and the deeper he went down, the more it penetrated his lungs, as if it were trying to displace all oxygen. Jack stopped for a moment, looking around. There was only darkness behind him. And then suddenly, a rustle. Unbearably quiet, almost indistinguishable, like a sigh of wind. But there could be no wind in a mine. Shit. Jack muttered, clenching his teeth. He wasn't superstitious. But there was something wrong with this place. Something much deeper than fear of the unknown. It was a sense of doom. As if he himself could no longer get out of here alive. His feet carried him on, even when his mind screamed at him to stop. Every wall bore traces of a past life: rust, locked doors with worn lettering, archaic computers overgrown with cobwebs. But all of that seemed inconsequential. Because the growing sensation of someone else's presence never left him. And suddenly he saw him. At the far end of the corridor, standing in the shadows, motionless, as if part of the wall. The outline was indistinct, as if it weren't a body, but a reflection of him. But as Jack took a step, the shadow moved, shimmering like thickened air. "Hey!" Jack shouted, his voice echoing in a rumble that didn't wait for a response. Silence. But there was something ominous in that silence. It was as if the mind itself had decided to be silent, watching him. Jack moved after the shadow, even though his mind was screaming at him, "No, don't follow it." But he had long ago gotten used to ignoring the voice of his mind. He had always sought that edge beyond which there was only the abyss. And so, once again, he found himself at the edge. Only now that abyss was staring back at him. The corridors began to narrow. The air became as dense as frozen glass. The hissing came again, but this time it sounded closer, more disturbing. It penetrated his ears, his brain, his heart. And then, in front of him, another figure appeared. This time no longer in shadow. She stood motionless, but her eyes glowed green like the liquid in the cracks of the walls. The face distorted, torn. No, it wasn't a face. It was a mask of fear, frozen in eternal agony. Jack froze. Their gazes crossed, and in that instant he realized it was human. Was a man. His heart clenched in his chest. Everything inside him screamed, "This is the end, you shouldn't have come here." But he couldn't look away. This man, no, this creature, looked at him like an old acquaintance. "Who are you?" Jack's voice dropped to a whisper, his throat tight with fear. Silence. But this time, something else sounded in that silence, an eerie truth that had not yet been spoken. The creature took a step forward. Slow, hesitant, as if every movement gave it pain. Jack pivoted, unable to believe his eyes. The creature seemed unkillable, like the very embodiment of the radiation with which it had been contaminated. He flung himself to run. The walls of the mine shrank around him, and the green glow grew even brighter. Now the light was not only coming from the cracks in the walls, but also from his own body. Panic gripped him. He knew this couldn't be real. He knew that somewhere deep in his mind something was going wrong. The sound of footsteps haunted him like ominous music. But it wasn't just the footsteps. Now it seemed as if the entire space of the mine was waking up. The hissing grew louder. It seemed to be coming from the walls, from the air, from his own mind. "No," he shouted, throwing up his hands. "It's not true. It's," his voice choked with despair. He ran to the great hall, where he stopped. Directly in front of him stood a crowd of similar creatures. They were like shadows of people who had long ago forgotten what it meant to be alive. Their eyes glowed in the darkness like ominous beacons. And suddenly Jack remembered, he was part of this. Jack was stunned. The memory rushed into his mind like a flood of black water. He remembered being here before. A long time ago. Not as a soldier, but as an experiment subject. They'd infected them with radiation, stripped them of their will, turned them into the likes of these creatures before him. No. No. Jack clutched his head, feeling his mind being torn apart. The creature in front of him stepped forward. It held out its hand, and Jack saw the markings on its skin, the same as his own. It was him. It was his past. Jack's last thoughts became confused, and he felt himself losing himself. Maybe he'd been one of them for a long time. Maybe he had never left this place. Darkness engulfed him. Questions were left hanging in the air, unanswered. Was this the end? Or just the beginning?